welcome back to Survival Minecraft. A wandering trader appeared at my starter base, but I decided to tame the llamas this time, and I didn't need the wandering trader, so he had to go, because I did already trade with him and got some rooted dirt, which would be cool for later. I next went to get some name tags, and I named the llamas Betty and Bob. Towards the end of the episode, I'll bring them to a new barn and a new stables that I made, but in the meantime, I tried to sit on them to tame them, and it worked after a few tries. I went to this really cool mountain that I found, and I started building a new house. I used spruce, deep slate, and calcite for the structure of it, and I would use some oak planks for the floor. I went with an L-shaped design because it fit very snugly in the mountain. There was this little nook that was perfect for a house. I pillared up and made a frame for the walls using spruce logs. At first I was going to strip them, but I replaced it all with normal spruce because I decided that looked much better. I used some deep slate bricks for the walls, and it looks pretty good. And I added some slots to put windows in. At first I was going to put another wall there, but then I decided to put a doorway. I kept trying different designs for a window, and I would eventually settle on one later on. I decided eventually to put a second doorway here, although at first I wanted to put another window. I continued using deep slate for all of the rest of the walls, and I went through a few different designs until I realized that I was actually happy with this one. I wanted to make a little porch area outside of the entrance to add some more detail, so I ended up going with 2 double doors. Because this house is on a diagonal, so the door would otherwise look a bit awkward. So I made this kind of front porch area, and it looked pretty good. That's not too bad, I don't think. Then I put some glass in the windows, and at first I wanted them to be 3 tall, but then I ended up making them 2 tall. I also hung some lanterns for light. I decided that I wanted them to be 2 tall instead and have some stairs. But now you can see the mountain that we're building at. It's a really epic place for a base. I used some upside down stairs to make an overhang, and I went around it adding more spruce logs. I also added some chiseled stone bricks because they make really nice corner pieces. Now I've gotten the frame started for the second floor because this will be a 2-story building. For the walls of the second story, I decided to use calcite from a geode that I mined, and I went to a nearby ocean to find another geode, because if you didn't know, the easiest ways to find geodes is to explore oceans and they spawn there quite frequently. It helps to have potions of night vision and even potions of water breathing sometimes, but that's not super necessary. At first, again, I was going to have the windows be 3 tall, but I ended up having them be 2 tall, and I used oak trapdoors instead of glass because I thought that the glass panes would blend in too much with the calcite. I wanted to decorate the outside of the house and add some more depth and details, So I added these little planter boxes out next to the windows with some oak leaves, spruce stairs, and trapdoors. I also used fences and the new spruce shelves, and it turned out really good. I tried that design at first, but I wasn't super happy with it, so I ended up just keeping it like that. And to make a little border on the window, I used some spruce shelves. Maybe they're like window shutters or something. Spruce shelves are kind of tedious to make because you have to strip the spruce logs first and then craft the shelves, but at least you get a lot of shelves, so it's quite good. I went around to the ground floor, and I replaced all of the windows with this new design that I made up. It just brings a pop of color to it, and there you could see that we have a second story now, and it's looking a lot more decorated and a lot better. For the roof, I used some dark oak for the trim, and then I would use oxidized copper for the trial chamber. Thankfully, Mojang added trial chambers recently, and the good thing about them is that you could get loads and loads of copper, so it makes it a lot easier and less tedious than having to wait for copper to oxidize. For the roof, I used this peak design, and it turned out pretty good. There you can see the frame of the roof, and I'll fill it in with some copper. I did have some left over from a previous mining mission, but I would have to go back to the trial chamber and mine some more to the platform to have a look at the roof, and it turned out really good. It's a bit deceiving because it's not fully finished, but you can get the idea of what I was trying to accomplish. I tried using some amethyst from the geode as well, but it turned out to be a bit too purple and clashed with the teal color of the copper. I flew away to get a look at it, and at first I liked it, but I wasn't 100% sure if I would keep it or not. So eventually I decided to get rid of it and just replace it with copper. I went back to the trial chamber, and thankfully it had this little tree in it, which is a mangrove tree. I blocked off the spawners so that the mobs wouldn't spawn, and you could see that I've been mining lots and lots of copper. This place is huge, and I haven't even mined all of it yet, but I went back to the mangrove tree, and I collected the leaves with a silk touch pickaxe so that I could get mangrove propagules, and I continued mining more copper. This is because I wanted to use mangrove wood for a barn. I also found a buried portal, which was kind of cool. It is possible in vanilla to get buried portals, but they are very rare, although I have found a few of them. So I decided to use this to find my nether highway. I put on some gold armor, and thankfully I was able to use this as a shortcut to get back home. Otherwise I would have to dig all the way back to the surface, and that would be quite tedious. I spawned back in this warped forest that I remembered from before, and it's kind of difficult to see in the video, but I was able to find a bridge that I made to my nether highway. I had to pillar up quite far, but it was a lot quicker, and now I have a portal that links right to the trial chamber. So I made a bridge back to my main portal. Back home, I continued to finish the roof, and I used oxidized copper blocks and stairs. I might need to get Swift Sneak from an ancient city, because that would definitely help with building. I next went to complete the back of the roof, and it turned out pretty good. Here is the grand reveal. I'm very happy with how it came out, It fits very snugly into the back of this mountain. I'm going to zoom in so that you could get a better look. And yeah, I think it's a really nice shape and a really cool style. But I wasn't happy with the amethyst, so I decided to replace it with more copper. However, I wanted to make a chimney, and at first I used some tough blocks, but it blended in with the mountain a bit, so I tore it all down and I replaced it with some cobbled deep slate, which was a lot more visible and stood out a lot better. However, you can't really see the campfire, so I might have to use some stained glass to make a fake cloud of smoke. I use this stair design because it makes a really nice lip above the chimney as kind of like a little vent. Ta-da! I think it's pretty good, and it's a lot clearer. I finally removed the amethyst and replaced it with some copper. It's so nice that I don't have to wax the blocks, thanks to the trial chamber. That's my favorite part of the Tricky Trials update. That's for sure. I flew away to get a better look, and yeah, I was really happy with that. It looks way better. The purple just clashes a little bit too much. It looks good on its own, and it does match the calcite, but not really the roof. I added some logs for extra detail, and I also wanted to make a little fence. So I used some oak to make it different to the spruce. But they met at this corner part, which was a bit awkward to put a gate. So I made a little covering with some oak logs and oak planks. I'm not sure if I like it, but I kept it for now. Let me know what you think, whether I should keep it or remove it. I simply used some oak plank slabs and spruce trapdoors. I extended a pathway that would go all along where I wanted to build, but there was a hill nearby that I would have to remove with my shovel. I did want to add in a few trees because it looked a bit empty, and I'm not very good at doing custom trees. I also wanted to make a little rose garden, so I bone mealed some rose bushes, and I made a small one with some oak leaves, but I would later extend this to be slightly bigger. I much prefer rose bushes to poppies because they're much more visible from far away. Poppies tend to blend in with the grass a little too much. Inside, I wanted to decorate the house and actually do an interior this time instead of just dumping a bunch of chests. So I made a staircase to the second floor, and now you can see what it looks like from the inside. It's not massive this house is not massive on the inside, but I probably won't be using it for anything. I made a little living room corner with 2 couches and a table using some shelves and trapdoors. Excuse my messy inventory. I really do hope we get an inventory update one of these days. We have so many blocks, so it gets quite cluttered. But yeah, that's quite a nice little table design. And I also enjoyed using the shelves to make, well, shelves. But ironically, you can't place shelves flat like these trapdoors. They can only be placed in an upright position. They can only be placed vertically, which is odd. But they do make good decoration blocks, and I prefer to use them for building rather than their intended purpose of inventory management. So I guess I can't get too mad at Mojang for not doing an inventory update when I'm not actually using the inventory update that they released. But on the second floor, I made another little couch, and I put some crafting tables and lanterns. I wanted to replace all of the torches, and I might also add candles in the future, but I do need honeycomb farm first. I added some little tables for some chests for decoration, and I added some more tables for bookshelves, and I will come back and add some bookshelves in them later on. I made a fake bed and I made some carpets to bring a bit more color because it was looking very brown. And yeah, quite happy with how that turned out. It looks pretty good and a lot less empty and boring. I used the leftover carpets on the ground floor, and I also made this little reading area with a desk and some more shelves. But that's about it for the house. What do you think? I might add some banners and paintings, but I didn't have any right now. Here you can see that I am extending the rose garden because I wanted it to line up with another plantation with another wheat field that I was making. I also harvested some nearby pumpkins, even though I already had a massive farm at the starter base. I was too lazy to go all the way over there. I thought that it would be kind of cool to use them for decoration, and I would also make a pumpkin patch later on. Pumpkins just bring a nice pop of color, and it's nice to have a different shade than the usual yellow and green. But there you have it. We have some trees and flowers and pumpkins, and it's looking quite cozy. But the house was looking quite empty on its own, and we do have this land nearby. Went on to make the next structure, which would be a stables for the llamas and a donkey. I made it about, I think, 5 or 7 wide, and I made 3 sections because I wanted to have multiple animals in here. I might also make a mule, or breed what I should say. I continued to use spruce and chiseled stone bricks, but I changed it up a bit by using stripped pale logs because it's a lot cheaper than calcite and quartz, and it has a nice Tudor look. I went with this pattern that allowed a small window using some fences, and I made some archways using spruce stairs and trapdoors and polished tuff and some pale oak fences. It looked pretty good, and I was quite satisfied with it, although it took me a few tries to get it just right. I had to redo it a couple of times. Now that I had the design that I wanted, I repeated it on this final stable stall. And there you can see the stables from the sky. I made a little extended fence so that the animals can have extra room. And I also just made these awnings to have some extra depth. For the roof, I continued to use the same pattern of dark oak and oxidized copper so that it was cohesive and matched the original house. However, I went with a different shape than the other one because I didn't want it to look too out of place. I continued to use this peaked roof design because it has a really cool fantasy aesthetic that I was going for. and I would also put some lights in the roof to stop mobs from spawning. What do you think of it so far? I added some more trees and bone meal, and I started on the barn. At first I was going to use more pale oak, but then it clashed too much and was too bright, so I didn't really like it, and I continued to simply use good old spruce. I do rely on this a bit too much, so in future builds I want to change things up a bit. I used cobbled deep slate and mangrove, which was quite tedious to farm because mangrove trees are massive and have so many leaves and roots, but I ended up using the leaves for the rest of the build. Here you can see that I used the leaves from the trial chamber, and this is how you could get mangrove propagules. All you have to do is simply bone meal them, and yeah, you get the propagules, which are basically saplings, and you can grow them on any ground. I replaced all of the pale oak with spruce, and it looked way better. It matched the previous builds we made, and I preferred the more muted look. The other one was a bit too bright and stood out too much. However, I did use pale oak fences for windows. I really like the mangrove wood. It has a very nice look, and it really suits the barn style because a lot of barns in the real world are typically red. I also use spruce stairs and trapdoors and shelves to make some fancy arches for some extra depth and detail. I surrounded that bottom part with shelves, and it really helps them to feel connected. It really helps these beams to feel connected. I wanted to add some more structural support, so I accidentally set off a firework, and I added these little parts with barrels. I also made the roof with cobbled deep slate this time because I wanted it to be slightly different. So I used cobbled deep slate to get this traditional barn style roof, and I used dark oak for the roof itself because it would match the build but not be identical, because I felt that if I used a green roof that it would look kind of like Christmas colors with the red barn and the green roof, but this way it suits the build way better. It's coming together quite nicely, and I also added some lanterns, which I need to do on the stables as well. But I had one more spot that I wanted to build at, and that was a windmill. I do love a good windmill. I feel that a survival base isn't complete without one, but they can be a bit difficult to build. For the base of the windmill, I used deep slate bricks and stone bricks, similar to my original windmill in the starter base, but this one is a lot bigger. I used some stone bricks, and it turned out pretty good. It took a while to figure out how I wanted it to look. For the next floor, I used more spruce and dark oak and oak. I also used barrels instead of chiseled stone bricks because they had more earthy wooden tones. To change things up a bit, I used bone blocks from my skeleton spawner, and it looks really cool. They have a very good medieval aesthetic, and it's a lot easier than using concrete, that's for sure. Because I ran out of calcite, so I didn't want to go and find another geode in the ocean. So I used what blocks I have, and it turned out pretty good. I made one final floor, and this is definitely the tallest building in this area. It's 3 stories tall, plus a roof. But it looks really epic in the end, almost like Stardew Valley. I put the wrong block there. I need to get better at not doing that. For the roof, I used some dark oak for the trim, but this time I decided to use some polished granite because I had lots of it from trading with villagers, so I didn't have to worry about mining another material for the roof. And I used this peak design, but I did it on all 4 sides, so it had a really cool look. As you can see, I got some polished granite from my villager trading hall, and I'm very happy with how it came out. It has a really nice medieval fantasy aesthetic, but of course, there was a challenge ahead. Even though I had an elytra, making the blades for the windmill was very tricky, so I'm not going to show you the step-by-step building process, but this is basically how I wanted it to look. And here is the final product. Ta-da! I used some wool for my sheep back at the starter base and some oak fences, and it came out really well. I also got some more spots ready for planting wheat fields because it brings a lot of color and makes the place look much more lived in. I tilled the soil and I made some spots with water so that the fields would be hydrated. And because I had leftover mangrove leaves, that's what I used for the border. Here you can see how my nano crop farm works. There's tutorials for this design on YouTube, but be warned because it uses tons of bone meal. I had to be at my skeleton farm all night long while I was sleeping in real life so that I could get enough bone meal for it to work, and it goes through it quite fast. However, basically there's an observer and this piston pushes the blocks so that they automatically break and the bone meal grows them up really fast. It's kind of complicated, but not too complicated, and doesn't take a long time to make it all. But that's how you can get mass quantities of crops. Of course, you could just wait for them all to grow, but that takes a while. So, after a few times of doing this, I finally had enough seeds, and it also helps that I have extra wheat in case I wanted to use it for building. I went back to the pumpkin patch, and this time I used my pumpkin farm at my starter base. But I didn't plant the pumpkins this time because I wanted them to be in a very random location. So I also wanted to make a fountain because I had some extra space to fill, and I felt that it needed a water source, so it made a very nice decoration. I used some polished diorite because it looks kind of like marble, and I didn't have any quartz yet. I simply bone mealed the rest of the ground and planted a few more trees, and yeah, that's basically this place complete. So now it's time to get some animals to house the barn, to live in the barn. It is quite a massive barn, and I'm not sure if I'll keep the cows in here, but I might use this for sheep instead. I put some more torches because I didn't want any mobs to spawn, and creepers can spawn up there, so it is kind of scary. It took me a while, but I finally managed to get the llamas, and I put them in the stable. I also got some sheep from nearby, which were already died, so in another episode, I might make an AFK automatic wool farm using dispensers and shears. I tried riding these llamas, but I don't think that's possible. I think you have to use wild llamas for that. But maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments, and I'll look it up, of course. But here you can see where this new area is located in comparison to our starter base. It's actually pretty close by, just between those two hills. The landscape is kind of awkward, and I was certain that the llamas would break the leaves, but surprisingly, they've been the only animals so far that haven't broken the leaves. They were very well behaved. very cooperative. So I'm glad that I tamed them. And they have these new patterns because I put white carpets in their inventory. So that's very cool. You can actually use different colored carpets to get different colored patterns on llamas, and that's quite a nice detail. I had to avoid this hole because I didn't want to fall inside it. But there you can see our new base is coming up ahead, and I really like this area. It's very cozy and cute. There's this hill on the right, and I might use it to make a small village, because I've been wanting to make a village for a while now, like I did in a previous survival season. So let me know what you think of that. But I might also try building in a new area because I wanted to build in some new biomes to take a break from this area. I had to wait for a few minutes for all of the wheat to fully grow because I was out of bone meal, and I used the leftover hay bales to add some decoration. We're finally coming up to the stable here, and you can see that we have a donkey already. I put the llamas inside their new forever home, and I hope they're happy with it. Betty and Bob will live here permanently now, and let me know if you have any other names for the animals. I might go on a mob collecting episode and do a bit of exploration, but yeah, you can see that the wheat is all fully grown, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's looking very cozy and cottagecore, if I do say so myself. And I might come back and add more builds here, but I kind of wanting to build in a view location, but it will still be in this survival world, of course. What do you think of it, and do you have any feedback? I would greatly appreciate it, of course. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. We've done a lot of building, so in the next episode I might go on an adventure and find some more mobs. I want to get some sniffers, axolotls, and frogs. I might also defeat some wither skeletons so that I can fight the wither and get a beacon. If you have any ideas of what I should do in future episodes, let me know, and I appreciate all of the feedback and support so far. Thank you for watching the previous episodes if you have. It means a lot to me. Take care, and bye-bye.